But that's not to say that it comes without prejudice.
Right.
Because, you know, there are things that my mum and dad, and like, you know, it's a generational thing as well, but there are things that like people just would have a really difficult time understanding, or wanting to understand, when it doesn't fall into how, you know, the world has been painted in a very black and white way to these people.
Yeah.
So having a conversation like this, for example, you know, you asked me 12 months ago, do I have anyone who's trans in my inner circle? And up to that point, I didn't. And that wasn't through choice so much as circumstance.
To you, it will change your life.
And it has.
And you feel like a new person. How do you feel?
Well, I mean, like, well, I'm sure we'll get onto this, but like other things have happened in the 12 months since we met.
Yes.
That have kind of, you know, I'm so happy that I met you for so many reasons, apart from the fact we have a right laugh together, but it's just, you know, it was a kind of weirdly poignant time that our paths crossed. And
it felt purposeful, and I think it really is. It's an alignment. It's like a connection that I think a lot of people would really love to have in their lives, whether that's in business or the things that they do with their friends and their family. And I think the minute that we actually got to meet in person, I felt so comfortable and at home, and I felt like, oh my God, we've been friends forever. And that's what I think is so wonderful, and it's so beautiful, and I'm like thankful for that as well. Another idea that I had, and a topic that I wanted to talk about, was the performance of like allyship, like being performative. There are two different, you know, dynamics. You can do all of the things, but I think when someone is really tapped into making space for you, you feel it. It feels different. But what does that allyship look like for you? Like, how do you feel or think of yourself in that light?
Well, first and foremost, not trying to put myself at the forefront of it all. Be the receiver of the kind of, you know, and be the person that's listening. Because everyone, and I come from this, as you know, as well, as intrinsic in me, always trying to like, I'm a fixer, I want to fix things. There's a problem, I want to fix it. And it's a sort of, you know, a mentality I've grown up with, but I think that's not what's at play here. Like just genuinely listening and receiving, and thinking how that implements on your life, and not, oh, how can I do something about this? Because the white savior thing is also something that kind of like comes hand in hand with that.
When you're in the world, raised the way that you are because of where you come from, who you are, what you look like, those privileges come into play, and then like they've taught you to be a certain way. So at some point you had to undo all of that. Like you have to do some work. So I guess in other words, what was that work like for you? Was it easy? Was it like, oh, maybe I'm making things too hard and I should just not really, you know, make a thing out of this or care about this? Because I do feel like there are a lot of cis white men, cis people in general, that just, they are able to not worry about what they are doing and who they are, but then they just feel like they don't need to do any work. And so we're kind of in the community, we're always thinking about the work that we have to do to just exist. So you take that work and then you go out into the world to live your life. It is an insurmountable amount of like weight. But when you have the ability to come into something and say, I don't have to care about it, but then find a reason to care, that's where I'm like, that's what I'm interested in hearing. Is like, how does that happen? Is it just because of people you met, people you worked with?
Because people I care about when they tell.
Wait, see, actually, this is an aha moment.
Right?
I was like, no, this is really good because the people that you care about connect you to the source of why we should be with each other, talking to each other, engaging with each other. I always say that when you know someone specifically dealing with something that's different than your own personal journey, you have the ability to connect and to be, to be empathetic towards that. So like that's kind of the point, as opposed to pushing away from that and blocking people out, which I think happens, especially like, you know, in the States. Like this is something that happens so often.
Yeah, which ties in with privilege again, of like having the option to go, oh, it's not for me right now, to dip in and out.
Yeah.
It's like, that's, because what you talk to me about people who like to present how they're doing something and all that. It's like, it's not, for me, it's not about presenting, it's actually just about being and doing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And like for me, like for example, going back to the religious thing, I always thought people that really impressed me and their faith that always got me curious was not them going, you need to believe this X, Y, and Z. It's quietly finding out that that person has a faith and they've just lived by example somehow. Mm-hmm. They live the thing they talk about.
Yeah.
They're not sort of like, they're not preaching it to people.
Right. Yeah.
And so you come to them in that kind of equation. And your intrigue is just by them being human.
Right.
And not them kind of like talking about an issue.
Yeah, no, it's a competition when it comes to how can I, win you over and how can I act and manipulate you this way, as opposed to just showing up and just being present in the moment and receiving somebody. And I learned something that was really interesting that a friend told me that I loved about being we want to truly be our authentic selves, right? Mm-hmm. So the authenticity of me showing up to a space with people who may or may not care about me or like me is the ability to just be myself, right? That is what it should feel like. That's what it is, but what it isn't is a kumbaya. So like my friend was saying, inclusivity is not just being able to be loved by everybody. Inclusivity is really about you being able to just be your full self at the table. We can agree to disagree. So I can say this is who I am and what I am, what I'm bringing. You can say, okay, that's great. The fact that I got to show up and be that is really the answer. Yeah. As opposed to which we would like, and we would love to have a dance party, and we love to get down and we'd love to sing It's Raining Them and just have around the campfire. But you know what I'm saying? What I'm saying is like just to be inclusive is to allow people to show up as themselves and let them be who they are.
Yes. And let them just exist and it not be some kind of like novelty thing.
But you're acting like this is something that people can do easily. This is difficult for people.
Well, I know. And I acknowledge
hard.
That as well. I do, I acknowledge that it's not simple. For lots of people, there's so much ingrained behavior and ingrained thought. And like going back to the pronouns thing, it's all about rewiring. It's, if you because I do believe that a lot of people do want to do the right thing, mm-hmm. but they're also so preoccupied with being seen to do the right thing that it stops them actually doing the right thing, right?
Which goes into being performative.
Yes, exactly.
It's all cyclical, I guess, really seriously.
But that's again why it's like this and what's happened with our friendship and stuff. And I didn't feel like I could ever have a safe conversation. Really, like certainly on camera that would go out to the world, where I wasn't worried about, God, maybe I've said the wrong thing or done the right thing, because that's, as much as, that comes from a good place, it's also not helpful.
Right. I sensed as someone that we were going to be doing this and they kind of, just off the cuff said to me, like, that's really wonderful that you and Tom have been having a good rapport and that he's willing to be there and to speak about things like this, but you don't know how big of an impact that it can have. And I think that is what's so important, because the simplicity of you even allowing people to inhabit the spaces that you operate in, it gives so many opportunities. It's created opportunities for Brandon, for myself, just like having the visibility. And I think you definitely deserve to be commended for that to some degree, because I feel like we're all in this together. There are obviously people who don't care and they don't want to be a part of the conversation. They just want things to work in their favor. But, this is a very Avatar moment, Avatar statement. It's like, when humanity is like breathing together and we are acting as one, I mean, that's when we're at our best and that's when we're being able to transcend all of the BS. So to help us transcend that, we need people like yourself. We need people who are in positions of power, who are running the show, who are calling the shots. And I think some of that comes down to being connected to someone personally. And if you have someone in your family, if you have a friend, if you know someone, this is what makes you go, oh, like, I should think about this.